My girlfriend confessed her ex proposed, and she said yes, so I calmly took back my ring and walked away. Weeks later, she was the one crying when her destiny crumbled. We'd been together for almost 4 years. The kind of relationship that wasn't flashy, but steady. We had our routines. Wednesday takeout sushi, Sunday morning grocery runs, late night walks when the weather was decent. I thought we were building something. I had proposed 6 months earlier. Not in some over-the-top viral way, just a quiet evening at our apartment with candles, a home-cooked meal, and a small velvet box I'd been hiding in my dresser drawer for weeks. She cried, said yes, and we spent the rest of the night talking about plans. Nothing official had been booked yet. She wanted time to savor being engaged, but she wore the ring every day. Or so I thought. Then, one evening, she asked if we could talk. She sat on the couch, legs crossed, hands clasped so tightly her knuckles were white. "There's something I need to tell you," she started. Her voice had that rehearsed quality, like she'd been running lines in her head all day. I braced myself for something small but irritating. Maybe she'd blown through our savings on another impulsive shopping spree, or maybe she wanted to move back with her mom for a while to reset. But it wasn't that. Instead, she took a long, shaky breath and said, "My ex, he proposed 3 days ago. And she swallowed. I said yes. For a second, I thought I'd misheard. My brain refused to process the words in the order she'd said them. My ex proposed. Said yes. She looked at me like she was expecting me to explode, to shout, throw something, demand an explanation. Maybe she thought the chaos would give her cover. Instead, I just sat there, staring. The silence stretched so long she started fidgeting with the hem of her shirt. "You're not saying anything," she finally blurted. "What is there to say?" I replied calmly. My voice didn't even sound like mine, flat, steady, detached. She tried to fill the space with justification. It felt right. We have this history, and when he asked, I realized maybe that's my destiny. But I care about you too. I do. You've been good to me. You've shown me what real love is. I actually laughed. Not because it was funny, but because the absurdity of the words hit me like a wave. I've said yes to someone else, but thank you for loving me. "Give me the ring back," I said. She blinked, stunned. "What? The ring? Take it off. Leave it here. Then pack your things and go." Her mouth opened and closed like she wanted to argue. Maybe she expected bargaining, maybe even a dramatic ultimatum. But I didn't give her one. I just held out my hand. Her fingers trembled as she slid the ring off. She set it in my palm, almost like it burned her skin. "I don't understand why you're being so cold," she whispered. "You said yes to another man," I said simply. "What reaction did you expect?" No screaming, no begging, just quiet dismissal. That seemed to rattle her more than anything else could have. She packed her things in silence while I sat at the table, staring at the ring. When she finally left, she hesitated at the door. Maybe, maybe we can still talk later, when things settle." I didn't answer. The door closed behind her, and the apartment was mine again. The weeks after were strange. Friends reached out. Some had already heard whispers. Apparently, her ex-turned-fiancé was bragging about winning her back, as though I'd been part of some competition I never signed up for. At first, I focused on cleaning up my life, canceling joint accounts, sorting through old photos, tossing out the little reminders she'd left behind. I wasn't bitter, not exactly. I was just hollow, like someone had scooped out the center of me and left the shell behind. But slowly, clarity seeped in. I realized how many red flags I'd brushed aside during our years together. The way she kept her ex on the back burner under the guise of just being friends. The nights she claimed she needed space but came home with a glow she didn't get from yoga. The way she often talked about destiny, as though love wasn't something you built, but something you stumbled into by accident. And then, weeks later, it happened. My phone buzzed one night around midnight. Her name lit up the screen. I debated ignoring it, but curiosity won. When I answered, all I heard was sobbing. Guttural, broken sobs. Then her voice, shaking. "I messed up. I messed up so bad. Please, please, can we talk?" I didn't respond right away. I just listened. She rambled about how her destiny had turned sour, how her ex wasn't who she thought he was, how everything was falling apart. And for the first time since she'd walked out, I felt something other than numbness. I felt relief. Not because she was hurting, but because her unraveling confirmed what I'd known all along. I hadn't lost my destiny. I dodged hers, Her midnight call wasn't a one-off. It was the start of a pattern. Over the next few days, my phone lit up constantly. Texts, voicemails, even long rambling emails. At first, she begged. Then she justified. Then she alternated between blaming herself and blaming me. One voicemail started with sobbing. He's not who I thought he was. He doesn't respect me. He doesn't even treat me like a fiancé. He says I'm lucky he even took me back. Another one, just hours later, carried a sharper edge. You didn't even fight for me. Do you know how that made me feel? Like I wasn't worth it. Like you never cared. I didn't reply. Part of me wanted to lash out, to remind her that I had cared, that I'd built my life around us. But another part, the part that was finally starting to taste freedom, knew silence was stronger. Through mutual acquaintances, I started hearing more about her destiny. Apparently, her ex-turned-fiancé wasn't just arrogant, he was reckless. He flaunted their engagement like a trophy, but behind closed doors, he kept living the same lifestyle that had ended their relationship years ago. Nights out with strangers, money disappearing from joint accounts, long absences with flimsy excuses. She had imagined some grand reunion story, star-crossed lovers finding their way back to each other. Instead, she was living with a man who treated her like a prize he'd won at a carnival, shiny at first, then shoved in a corner and forgotten. It didn't take long before the cracks started to show in public. They argued at bars. She cried in bathrooms. People who once envied her romantic destiny now whispered about how quickly it was collapsing. 2 weeks after her first call, she showed up at my apartment. I didn't buzz her in at first, but she just stood there at the entrance, holding her phone up like she'd camp out until I relented. Eventually, I walked down, more out of curiosity than compassion. She looked different. Makeup smeared, hair unkempt, the glow she used to flaunt replaced by dark circles under her eyes. "Please," she said, voice breaking the second she saw me. "I don't know who else to talk to." I crossed my arms. "Why me?" "Because you were steady," she whispered. "You didn't make me feel like I had to fight for scraps. You loved me without games." And I threw it away. Her words hung in the air. In another life, maybe they would have cut deep. But right then, they barely scratched the surface. "You said yes to him," I reminded her calmly. "You don't get to circle back when it doesn't work out." She shook her head, tears spilling down her cheeks. "I didn't know." "You didn't want to know," I corrected. "You wanted excitement. Destiny. Whatever word you dressed it up with. And now you're here because reality doesn't match the fantasy." She sobbed openly, right there on the sidewalk. People walking past slowed down, curious, but I didn't move to comfort her. Not out of cruelty, but because that chapter of my life was over. Finally, I said, "I hope you figure things out, but it won't be with me." Then I turned and walked back upstairs, leaving her standing there with nothing but her tears. That should have been the end. But she kept trying. At one point, she sent me a long email with the subject line, "My destiny was a lie." She wrote about how her ex had belittled her, how he mocked her in front of his friends, how he compared her to other women. She admitted he'd even hinted that the engagement was just to see if she'd still bite. Reading her words, I felt a strange mix of anger and pity. Not anger for her, anger for myself, for the years I spent thinking I wasn't enough. And pity, not because she lost him, but because she thought she'd gained something real in the first place. I didn't respond. The final straw came a month later. I got a call from a mutual friend. "Hey, just so you know, she's been telling people you're still in touch, that you might take her back." That's when I realized silence wasn't enough anymore. I needed a boundary. So I called her. The first time I'd spoken to her directly since the night she confessed. "I need you to stop contacting me," I said firmly. "No more calls, no more emails, no more showing up. Whatever's happening in your life is not my responsibility. We're done. We've been done." She tried to interrupt, but I didn't let her. "This isn't a conversation. It's a boundary. Respect it." And then I hung up. I blocked her number, her email, even muted mutuals who kept trying to send me updates. If she wanted to claw her way out of the mess she'd chosen, she'd have to do it without me. Looking back, I realized the power wasn't in walking away that night. It was in refusing to walk back when she opened the door again. That's where people slip, when nostalgia softens the edges of betrayal. But every unanswered call reminded me, she didn't just make a mistake. She made a choice. And so did I. Update 1.it was almost 2 months after the night she dropped the bombshell about her ex's proposal when the final act unfolded. By then, I had settled into a new routine. My evenings weren't haunted by unanswered questions anymore. They were filled with gym sessions, dinners with friends, and long stretches of silence that felt more like peace than loneliness. I thought I'd finally put her ghost to rest. Until one Friday evening, as I was heading out with coworkers, my phone buzzed with a message from a number I didn't recognize. It was her sister. "I know you don't want to hear about her, but you should know she's in bad shape. He called off the engagement last week. Said he never loved her, just wanted to prove he could get her back. She's devastated." I stared at the screen for a long moment. A few months ago, that message would have cracked me open. But now, all I felt was a strange, cool detachment. I typed back, "I'm sorry she's hurting, but it's not my place to fix it." Then I put my phone away and went to dinner. Of course, life doesn't end neatly when you set boundaries. A week later, she found a way around the blocks, through an old work email I'd forgotten about. Her message was raw, almost frantic. He humiliated me, in front of his family. Said I was pathetic for waiting all these years, that he only wanted to prove he could dangle me like a puppet. "I've never felt so small. I miss you. I miss what we had. Please, can we just talk?" I read it twice, then 3 times. But instead of guilt or longing, I felt clarity. Because there it was, in her own words, the truth I'd known all along but hadn't been able to admit. She hadn't left me for love. She'd left me for ego, for validation, for the shiny promise of a storybook ending that never existed. And now, stripped of her fantasy, she wanted to retreat to the comfort she once mocked. I closed the email, archived it, and didn't reply. The breaking point came a few days later when she showed up at a cafe I frequented. I was mid-conversation with a friend when I noticed her in the doorway, scanning the room until her eyes landed on me. Her face lit up like she thought this was fate. I excused myself from my friend and stepped outside before she could approach. "Why are you here?" I asked. She looked stunned, almost wounded by the bluntness. I just, I had to see you. To apologize, to explain." "You've already explained." I cut her off. "You chose him. That was your explanation." Tears welled in her eyes. "But it was a mistake. I thought." "No," I said firmly. "You didn't think. You wanted. You wanted excitement. You wanted destiny. And you didn't care who you hurt chasing it." Her lip trembled, and for a moment, I saw the girl I used to love. The one who laughed at my terrible jokes, who fell asleep with her head on my chest, who swore we were building something together. But that girl was gone. She'd been gone since the night she slipped off my ring and replaced it with someone else's promise. "I don't expect you to take me back," she whispered. I need you to know I regret it." I took a breath, steady and deliberate. "I hear you, and I hope you find healing. But I don't want this in my life anymore." She tried to reach for my hand, but I stepped back. "Goodbye," I said, and walked away, leaving her frozen on the sidewalk. That was the last time I saw her in person. Word spread quickly among mutual friends that her engagement had collapsed spectacularly. Her ex had moved on almost immediately, already parading another woman around. She, meanwhile, was left to pick up the pieces of a life she'd gambled and lost. People kept asking if I felt vindicated, if I enjoyed watching karma do its work. But the truth? The only thing I felt was freedom. Because her downfall wasn't my victory, it was just the natural consequence of her choices. My victory was choosing myself, refusing to be someone's safety net, refusing to let her rewrite our story as one where she could leave and return on her own terms. Months later, on a quiet evening, I stumbled across the ring I had once bought for her. It was tucked in the back of a drawer, forgotten amid old receipts and spare keys. For a moment, I turned it over in my hand, remembering what it had symbolized. But instead of sadness, I felt gratitude. That ring was no longer a symbol of what I lost. It was a reminder of what I gained. Strength, self-respect, the ability to walk away when staying would have destroyed me. I sold it the next week. Used the money to book a trip I'd always put off because life with her was full of compromises. And as the plane lifted off the runway, I smiled. Not because she was gone, but because I was finally free to live without waiting for someone else's approval. And that's the part no one tells you about heartbreak. The real closure doesn't come when they apologize or when karma catches up to them. It comes when you stop needing either of those things. She made her choice. I made mine. And I'll never regret the day I chose myself. Final update. It's been a year since the night I walked away from her on that sidewalk. A full 12 months of learning what life feels like when you stop living in someone else's shadow. When people ask me about that time now, I almost feel like they're asking about another person's life. That version of me, sitting in a restaurant as she confessed her ex's proposal, watching my future dissolve in real time. He feels like someone I once knew but no longer am. In the past year, I've moved to a new apartment across the city. Smaller, cozier, filled only with things that matter to me. I finally bought the guitar I used to daydream about but always shelved because she said it was too loud for our place. Some evenings, I strum clumsy chords until my neighbors probably wish they could evict me. But it's mine. My noise. My space. Career-wise, things have taken off in ways I couldn't have predicted. The focus I once poured into managing the constant turbulence of our relationship is now invested in work and side projects. And it shows. I earned a promotion last spring, not because I suddenly became smarter, but because I finally had the bandwidth to apply myself without emotional chaos bleeding into every task. But the real shift? Relationships. I don't mean romantic ones. Not yet, at least. I've dated casually, sure, but nothing serious. And that's okay. For now, the most valuable thing has been reconnecting with friends I drifted from while I was with her. It's funny how much you can lose in the name of love. Missed birthdays, canceled plans, unreturned calls. I've spent this year rebuilding those bridges, and the richness of those friendships has been more healing than any new romance could provide. As for her, she's still around, in the periphery. I hear whispers from mutual acquaintances. She's single again, still chasing destiny, still posting cryptic quotes about betrayal and fate on social media. Occasionally, I'll see a message request from her pop up, but I've never opened them. Not out of anger, just disinterest. Whatever chapter she's in now, it's no longer mine to read. The hardest part was the first few months, when I battled the quiet. Nights when my mind replayed her laughter, her warmth, the life we almost had. That's the part no one talks about, the addiction of shared history. You don't just detox overnight. You sit with it, you ache, and then one day, you wake up and realize you haven't thought of her in weeks. That's when I knew I'd truly let go. People sometimes ask if I regret not fighting harder, not trying to win her back after she left. But the truth is, there was nothing to win. You can't fight for someone who already chose to leave. All you can do is choose yourself. And that's the best decision I've ever made. So here's where I stand today, at peace. Not bitter, not triumphant, just free. And if there's one thing I'd tell anyone reading this who finds themselves in a similar situation, it's this. Closure doesn't come from them realizing your worth. Closure comes when you realize your own.